Well, it is week 4. We're about to go into week 4 of LEC and LCS. I'm joined right now by Drakos for a casual chat. I need to actually come up with a name for the series because now I've done this a couple times with Shocks, and now I'm sitting down with you, and I don't know what this is other than an interview. It's
Okay,
something
so
that I do.
I have one for you because I tried to make a talk show forever ago and I
Yeah.
never got to make it, and it was called Let's Talk League. And I don't know if someone's stolen that one already because this was 2015 when I pitched this, but that's
Yeah.
my pitch for you is Let's Talk League
Well, and
because
so, but this is the
it's
thing is we
simple.
do talk about League, but also some of this is just like catching up and hanging out and more casual. Shout out, by the way, to Alienware before I forget. They are sponsoring this piece of content. No, so all right, you and I, have we hung out ever before?
Oh, I
Because
don't
we've
think
been
like
at stuff and we've talked a
yeah.
lot, but I don't think I've ever done like a let's grab food while you're out here, or even like in a group. I don't think that's ever happened.
I think we've been adjacent. I think we've definitely been at a lot of the same esports parties and esports events, but I
Yes.
don't think we've ever done like a me and you go get food and shoot the shit kind of ordeal.
Right. And by no means is this Skype call going to be able to do that. But it was very funny because I was thinking about this and I feel like I know you like in my mind I'm like, "Oh yeah, Dracos and I are cool. We're friends and everything's neat." But then I just thought I'm like I've interacted with him only a handful of times. So um maybe the first part of this is I could actually just get to know you as a human being, and then we'll talk some about LEC stuff and
Sure.
whatever other random league stuff. But um, so wait, okay, when did you get into league and all this stuff? Because obviously I know a lot of the LCS folks and when they show up on the scene, but
Mm.
you kind of just I know you've been around for a while, but I don't remember in my mind when you popped up and how everything started.
Yeah, so wow, it's a big throwback. So I want to say, shit, the years they blend together.
I know. Well, especially in
So just
quarantine, everything
yeah,
feels like it was just that other
20
world.
Ooh, 2020 has been a long one.
Yeah.
The months do feel like years. No, so I just I guess I'll start kind of from where people will probably know me from and then work backwards because I think that's the easiest way for me to identify the timeline. And hopefully people can follow. But
Yeah.
so 2016 is like my breakthrough, right? It's like everyone swapping to dual stream. Catastrophic decision that was. It was very good to as an inspiring caster to get work. So I got pulled in on that. And before that, kind of the reason that I was selected and picked up, and the reason that people started to see me was that I did Kespa Cup with Frostgren, and I also did IEM San Jose with a bunch of different people. And like before that, I was mostly just working NA Collegiate.
Which San Jose
And
was that?
that was, I want to say 2015 San Jose. That was the
Okay.
San Jose where Origin benched Xpeke, or Xpeke stepped down, and they
Yeah,
put
yeah.
in Power of Evil for the first time, and that was the big
And
deal.
then
I
they
think
beat
Stixay.
TSM and beat Bjergsen or whatever, and that was yeah.
Yeah. That was the big spicy deal if I remember correctly. And then that was I think the first time CLG played with Stixay. I don't remember if it was his first season or split with CLG, but I remember interviewing Stixay
Yeah.
at that event for the first time. And then LGD were there and they were really bad.
Well,
And that's all I remember.
okay, so you had done so in 2015 you had done Kespa Cup, you're saying, and I am San Jose?
Yeah, I did both of those, and then I did a bunch of collegiate stuff before that, but all that was like small potatoes
And
compared
were
to
you
the
in
IMs.
college during like when you were doing the collegiate stuff? Like, or were you just doing this? I actually have
No,
no idea how old you are. I assume you're younger than
I
me.
I'm so this is a problem. The second I got past 25, I stopped caring.
Yeah.
So I'm 27 now. I'm turning 28 in
Okay.
November. And so I've been around for a little while, but I basically so I dropped out of school because I hated college. Like I was a really big fan of like hands-on learning and experience learning, and I was very fortunate to get to do a lot of that in high school, specifically with like media communication stuff. I learned Photoshop in high school. I learned video editing in high school, and that was like really cool to me. And that's kind of what I always wanted my education to look at or look like. And then as a kid with some scholarships and like no money, not coming from a background where you have much money, coming into college was like a smack in the face where they're like, oh, here's these prerequisites. Like, here's all these things that you have to learn that you have no interest in learning and are like super just not thrilling or not exciting. So I dropped out and I floundered for a while. I found a job and my logic was like, oh, I'll go back to community college once I have more money. Because I just one of my big fears always has been like getting into debt, because that's kind of just my family background, is that my mom had a lot of debt and I was like, I don't ever want that to happen to me.
Yeah, I could definitely
Um,
relate. That's very similar background. Yeah, single mom, didn't have a lot of money, so
yeah, and it's scary, right? It's scary even if there is such a thing as good debt, it doesn't really feel like it.
right.
At the time, right? And so I just like worked whatever jobs, but then I eventually found a job that was pretty stable, and I was excited, but it kind of like gave me room to be more ambitious in my personal life. And I was always a big League of Legends fan. Started playing pre-season 1 in high school. I've always been terrible though. I can't like, say that there's any accomplishments related there.
Yeah.
And GG Chronicle, which was the old news site that Monte Cristo kind of
Yes.
ran for a while alongside Adam Cogswell, put out this call for people. And like all esports work at the time, it was like unpaid. It was just like, hey, if you're excited about esports, come work
Yeah,
for
this
us.
probably would have been 2012, I think, 2011, 2012.
Monty actually sent me my like cover letter email because he was digging through. I'm gonna just double check really quick just to find the exact date, because
Okay.
it is a big throwback.
Yeah, I actually I was going through some files last night and found a bunch of old pictures from back in the day, and it's just like we have now been doing this long enough, and the industry has existed long enough that stuff just feels like archival footage. It's like crazy.
Yeah, so this was actually 2014. I think was after they had kind of started and been doing stuff for a while. So I kind of came in, I think, in the second wave, which would eventually become like the final wave, as the site
That's
kind
right.
of
Okay.
faded away. When there's that like 1 to 2 year period where I think like written journalism really suffered in esports, especially before like ESPN started coming in, and Fion kind of turned it around, I would
Yeah.
say. Um, yeah, and like even just reading this cover letter now, it's it's like so bad.
So
I used
wait,
to be
you were
called
applying to
SIFA.
write for them?
I was applying to be a writer and graphic designer. That was like the
Okay.
two things that I basically, my thing was like, I want a job in esports, and I respect Monty and I think Monty's dope. So working for Monty would be really cool. And so I was just like, I'll do whatever I have this limited skill set. I'm a mediocre writer and I'm a mediocre ass graphic designer, but like I'll do
Just do
whatever.
something. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that was all I wanted. I wanted to get my foot in the door, and it worked. And I had a ton of work to do, and it was actually I put more hours into this than I put into my regular job. It was like it was this really, really, really big grind. And then through that, I met Optimus Tom, Tom
Oh yeah.
Seacross, who works for Riot still. He does
On the
stats for the NA
LCS, yeah,
team.
just that stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely wonderful human being. And he got me my first casting gig, for with a company called Well Played. And
Yes.
I don't remember what it was. You remember Well
Yes.
Played? It's a
Well, Fear
good.
Gorm was
Fear
who's
Gorm worked for
yeah, Derek
Derek Asiatu,
Asidu,
who
who
has, I
went on
think.
to work at Riot and is now a TFT streamer. It's kind of funny how everything went. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was working with him right after Derek, I think, left, and eventually I ended up working. Derek was working on collegiate, and eventually I did collegiate through that, and kind of it's all snowballed from there. I started doing LJL in all hours of the night, and it was this. I think, as for many people, it is when you're getting started, is just this super big grind. And I think I was just very fortunate that at that time in esports, everyone was either professional, like they could write a decent email, or they were talented, and like very almost never were they both. And I was
Yeah.
like the perfect middle ground. I was not a great shoutcaster by any means, but I did show up on time. I wrote a decent email. I told you if I wasn't going to be there, and if you asked me to do something, I would do it. Sponsor
And
shoutouts,
had you
whatever.
wanted to be a shoutcaster, or did this because you're talking about you were writing, you were doing all this stuff, so that like, was this all in the move to be a shoutcaster, or was it just a situation where you're like trying to grab stuff and Optimus Tom was like, hey, there's a gig here if you want it?
I think I was just trying to grab stuff. Like I did a podcast at the time too, Adam Cogswell, who I don't know if he still does it anymore. The Trinity Force
Trinity Force
podcast did a
podcast?
bunch.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. He did a bunch of podcasts at the time, and I ended up being on the LCS/EU LCS coverage podcast.
Yeah.
And so I was honestly figuring it out. I think I was really soul searching. I think the only thing that really stood out to me at that point in my life was advertising and marketing. Wyden and Kennedy, which is a big advertising firm, has an office in Portland.
Yeah.
I think it started there, and I was like trying to get informational interviews, and I was like trying to get these advertising internships for a little while when I first started college, before I just stopped going to class. That was a questionable time in my life. But yeah, so I was kind of just scrambling to figure out what I wanted to do, and shoutcasting kind of just stuck for me. Like it was really fun. I always thought I was well spoken. So
Yeah.
it kind of like worked with my interests, although in hindsight I was not nearly as well spoken as I thought I was. And
Well,
it
you
all
hit
kind of
the bar, right? I feel like for casting, there's like there are requirements in terms of like, can you speak quickly, can you structure sentences in interesting ways, and then that at least gets you in the door, and then maybe once you get in you're like, oh wait, there's actually a whole lot more that I have to worry about once I've like get in front of the microphone and start casting stuff.
I think you're completely right. I think that like the bar was also like I said, I've lucked out because there was a lot of demand for League of Legends and there
Yeah.
was not a lot of talent and there was not infrastructure in place to find talent. So if you were just in, and I think this is true of a lot of people that I've worked with, if you were in the right place at the right time, with the right attitude, the right work ethic, they just like you just got picked up. And
Yeah,
that
I
was
mean,
that was
Reddit
just
would tell you that's the only reason why half the people in the industry are here right now, including myself.
look, you know what? Like I'm there is a certain element to that. I'm
Yeah.
not trying to discredit your career or my career at all, but like there is always like a little bit of luck in it. Like why are we the two?
I mean,
Why am
that's
I the
it's.
shoutcaster? Why are you the interview that ended up here? Right?
I mean, I think, yeah, I those are always interesting discussions to have or to see, because I think the mistake that people make is they correctly say, well, this person was right place, right time, but
Mm.
then they attribute like the next many years of success to, well, that person was just right place, right time, and they shouldn't be here, and rather than thinking about all the work that you did, because you and I both
Yeah.
know people that were in the space during that time that are no longer in the space because maybe they were a dick, or or they,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's just like they didn't do the work or whatever. So it's interesting.
I think there's a clear line between like blatant nepotism and like getting lucky, right?
Yeah.
And I would like to think that both of us are on like the yes, we're lucky, we're fortunate to do what we do, but I also think that we put in the work
Right.
and we like did what we had to do, right? And it's definitely not like anyone ever put me in a position of power. Like I was working for pennies
Yeah.
for 90% of my, shoutcasting. Well, not anymore, just
Right.
for like 2 years, and now
Yeah. Now
I
you're
guess
working for nickels, I think.
now I'm working for euros. You'll
Oh, yes,
find
yes,
as I've
actually,
made the
good point.
made the
Good
transition.
point. Okay, so wait, so you start doing this casting. You're like, okay, this is an okay gig. You like it, and you're learning and all that stuff. How does that translate to LEC or EULCS at the time? I guess they needed casters, and you were just in the bucket of people that had been doing stuff, so they picked you up, I guess.
Yeah, and I think I was also very fortunate. Like, definitely, like that bucket was just needed. 2016 was just a mess of a year. I think it's safe to say. I don't think anyone's going to tell you otherwise. I think the double stream thing was just like a colossal failure. But the one thing it did do was guarantee that there was a lot more work for casters, right?
Yeah.
And also, I went to 2015 Worlds as a fan, and I went with Froskarin, who I had worked with on a few podcasts and was kind of a friend of mine.
2015 was Europe, right?
Yeah, 2015 was Europe, and so
Okay.
that was the first time I had traveled to Europe and was hanging out with Frosker, and who at the time was working closely with the LPL broadcast. So I got to meet a lot of the people who I would eventually work with later.
Were you just tagging along with her? You were like the junior caster kid that she had taken.
Well, she was also I guess, but she was also the junior caster kid. So I was like third down in the hand holding. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like if I think Spawn was like the Papa caster, and then it was like Rusty who's like the baby caster who's working on the broadcast, and then it was Frost holding Rusty's hand, and it was
Yeah,
me
okay.
holding Frost's hand, and we were
Yeah.
all just kind of along for the ride. We were big fans, and it was never, I didn't go with like intention to like network or anything, but you just, when at esports in that time, if you just followed the people around that you got along with, you would just end up at parties or bars
Yes.
with people who have decision making power. And
Yeah.
it was surreal. It was weird to meet a lot of people that I knew controlled my future who were heavily intoxicated as my first meeting. It's like, how the hell do you play this? Esports is weird that way.
Yes, very true. Did you what did you only go to finals, or how much did you go to?
I actually, so I missed groups because we didn't have enough money to go to groups.
Yeah.
And then we missed Paris, but we came in at London. We stayed in a hotel with Pyra, who had also worked for us. He very nicely loaned us his hotel room. And then we were in, Brussels. Brussels was definitely my favorite world stop of all time to this day, even after having worked many events. It was a jam.
Was that just because everybody was just going to the bars?
Yeah, I think
I
we all
mean,
just got drunk every night. That was
Because
the first time in my
that
life.
that was again back whenever everybody went and there was like this caravan essentially for this stuff. Brussels was interesting because I believe there were only 2 days, right? Because we had only semis, and so everybody leaves London and goes to Brussels, and then there's just 5 days of nothing to do but like Shocks taking people to her favorite bars and introducing people to like her old friends and
Yeah.
drinking all Trappist ales and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a good time, and I remember that was an interesting year for like Worlds content too. It was the first time that they really branched out and they started doing like the local like, oh, now we're in Brussels,
Yeah.
let's film 3 directors chairs and interviews. I don't remember what it was called. I'll call it Countdown now, but
Yeah.
I don't know if it was called Worlds Countdown back then, but it's basically Worlds Countdown. It
That's
was
when they did
it,
the speaking of Shocks, that's when they did like the profile on her going back to her hometown and all that stuff, and they put that on the broadcast as well. That's one of the big pieces of content I remember from that time.
yeah, it was a big era. They were doing that with all of the kind of the big name talent, and
Yeah.
it was cool. It was actually I remember thinking about it as a caster as like a really cool way to see like where everyone had come from.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was always crazy to me. Esports is really unique, right? Like while everyone's story seems to involve them at some point sitting in their basement playing video games for a number of years, like everything around that is always so completely different.
I mean, actually, it's a really good point, and I mean, I think we think about it as sometimes, but it is really funny that it's like, where did you come from? Well, I sat around, I played video games, I like didn't know what I was gonna do, and then I became a world traveler and saw all these foreign cities and met all these people in different countries, and I think about, I mean, obviously, I live in LA, which is not too far away from where I grew up, but you're over in Europe, and presumably a little further away from Portland than LA from San Diego, and it is just funny to see like the amount of friends that I have on every continent in the world. It's wild.
Yeah, I remember. So the other gig that I forgot to include in my beginning was that I ended up casting like LMS finals in English because
Yeah,
Riot contracted Twitch, Twitch contracted someone else, and Twitch hired me and Achilles, now Overwatch League caster. Um, and I remember not having a passport and never having left the country outside of when I was like a baby and couldn't remember anything. And my mom went to Mexico. And I remember having to explain to her that we had to drive to Seattle because it's the only place where you get a day in the area where you get a day of passport
yeah,
and what I was going to do with it. And she was like, so are they gonna like kill you and take your organs? Like
right.
what's like what's the scheme here? Do you have a contract? Do you trust these people? Like is this a thing? Because this is exciting, but also this doesn't sound real. Like this can't possibly real. These people don't know you. You've done this for how long? Like so it was yeah, it was interesting. Now I am actually a world traveler from nothing to everything in the span of like 3 years.
Yeah, no, it is. It's just wild where people end up in such a short time in this industry. So okay, so then you started doing all the casting, and what was the decision to move to Europe like? Because that must have been spooky.
Yeah, it was really spooky and it was actually really up in the air at the time. I had the option because a lot of people were expanding and a lot of people were looking for new talent. So I actually had the option to go to OS. I could have gone to LCK or I could have gone to Europe. And a lot of it at the time was kind of figuring out what was right. And I definitely had a lot of nights where I like was panically messaging, the responsible parties from each of those offices. In this case, Monty and the lady whose name I've forgotten who would have worked on my contract if I'd gone to LCK. Dirk, who's still my boss to this day, and then Spawn, who at the time was caster managing, and just like I went through so many different little crises of faith because I didn't know what the right choice was, right? And I had idolized Monty for so long, and it was so good, but I was also like, damn, if I'm a freelancer, I have like the worst self-discipline of all time. Like I didn't think I could do it, so I ended up picking Europe because I thought like, okay, they've got the infrastructure, they've got the caster team. Like if I'm going to grow and get better anywhere, it's going to be Europe. Um, and in the end, I was right, but
Did
I
you? Yeah.
will
Did you
say,
regret it at first? I mean, especially given that I'm sure it was a shit show in that year, and for a long time, EULCS was kind of flamed pretty hard.
yeah, it was. I think that it wasn't specific to EULCS. I think there was just like there's this aura around like Riot at the time of like pure professionalism and God, like Riot's just nailing esports right now.
Yeah.
And like at the time I think that they were, right, compared to everything else. But it also kind of implied to I think everyone watching, myself included, who were watching from the outside that like Riot knew what they were doing all the time. And I think when I joined EU, I learned that like, oh no, there's still a lot of shit that like we're figuring out. There's a
Yeah.
lot of shit that like there's ideas that are like being presented, especially in the time of like the Riot Manifesto at the time that are like ideas to strive towards and not like the active reality of your everyday to day life. And so I think I was really disillusioned really quickly because I think I had this like over romanticized idea of what Riot Games was going to be for me. That said, like I was surrounded by a really supportive team, but I was also surrounded by a really supportive, like it was a supportive team who would help me grow, but it also wasn't like, here's everything you need to grow, right? It wasn't like they just handed it to me on a platter. Like I had to fight for it. I had to fight for people's time and attention in the company. And in hindsight, it was fine, and I think it was worth it. But I think at the time, those first few months, being in a country where I didn't speak the language, I wasn't officially on broadcast for the longest time, so I was just behind the scenes, just waiting, kind of showing up to meetings, trying to be an overachiever because like that's all I could do to show that I was of value to the team. And not really having like any friends outside of the context of whatever time my colleagues wanted to spend with me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was brutal. It was brutal at first, but
Did you ever worry that you'd like not make it on a broadcast or something? Did you know that it was going to happen, or were you? Because I would imagine if I went to another country to start the gig, and then you're kind of trying to provide value, but everybody, I mean, I know what productions can be like, and in that environment where they're switching to two streams and everything's in upheaval, you probably got shuffled around a little bit, or maybe it's easy to be worried about getting lost in the chaos.
yeah, I think if this was Riot 2020, I would have been really scared because I think Riot 2020 is much better about like one, I don't think they ever would have pulled me out, right? Because they just would have recognized that there was like redundant talent.
Yeah.
But I think Riot's much better at being like, hey, like we need you or we don't need you. They're much better about setting like clear expectations and being like, this is what your contract's going to be, this is what you're going to get, which I think is super fair. And it's like I actually like how they've taken the step in this direction. But the balancing act is that like 2016 Riot was just a mess. Like I could have shown up and like I think not done a job for 3 months, and they would have been like, "Oh, but you're a nice guy and you try really hard,
Oh,
so
okay,
like
yeah,
we'll keep you employing." It's also notoriously difficult to fire people in Germany, and I did have a full-time employment contract at the time.
okay,
So
gotcha.
while I was scared, I don't think like there was. I think at that time in Riot, they would have been like, "We will find work for you because
Yeah,
you are the quote unquote like personality fit. Like you care about this and you want to try really
yeah,
hard." So
that
maybe
makes
I would
sense.
have ended up writing articles or doing graphic design, but I think they would have found a spot for me.
Okay. Uh, so I mean, man, it must have been kind of depressing or scary or lonely going over there. And I I've also what time of the year was this? Was this in winter?
It wasn't, I know what you're thinking, because yes, because when we went to Berlin for Worlds, which I imagine is probably one of the few times, like one of the times that you were in Berlin
Yeah.
for the first time, it was giga depressing. It was
I mean,
dark and it was
Germany,
cold.
Europe as a whole is pretty depressing weather-wise, and most of the places I've been. But Berlin just can have everything looks grayscale. You think that all the color
Yeah.
has washed out of the world. So,
Yeah, that was my first impression too. I was really scared. I came in more
although you
towards
came from
summer.
Oregon, so me,
I
also
came from Oregon, but
also a
like
little
Oregon
gloomy.
has like beautiful green trees.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah,
like cold, like because like in certain parts of Berlin, you just look like you're in like a Cold War documentary,
yes,
right? Like all the old like Soviet buildings that have been built out, and like that's where the neighborhood that me and Frost were staying in, when we were there, was this was like that, and that's where Pyro lived, and it's like every apartment building identical. And I was like, oh my god, this is like I've only ever seen this in movies. This is so
right,
surreal. But now having lived here, it's like it's literally nothing like that. It's a wonderful city, but yeah, the winters are dark and are definitely
yes.
not good for a first impression. But my experience was summer, and it was really hot, and it was really gross, and there's no AC. Which is just constantly a misery. Good for the planet, but so bad for the immediate enjoyment of life.
Yeah.
In Berlin, yeah, it was hard. It was hard. I was sad. I was depressed. Like I don't think there's any way that I couldn't have been. And it was difficult. I was really lucky that like the team was pretty supportive of just like spending time with me and doing things with me, and that like at that time in the league, like every Friday night, people would go out, and all the players and all the staff and everyone would go out to a bar together, and so it was really easy to fill my schedule with things to do.
I it's interesting. You kind of strike me, especially when we were talking about, you wanting to do more hands-on stuff, creative stuff, dismissing college. I have so many friends that I've met through this industry that are video producers and like video editors and people who like create videos and all this stuff. And I feel like so many of them have that story of like, I wanted to work on creative things and create stuff and work in, you said like multimedia and all that. And
Mhm.
it's interesting. Do you think that that's like a path you could have gone down separately? Is done more like production, producer, behind the scenes, creating videos, not, in front of the camera?
Yeah, I mean, I've always really had a passion for it. and I think at some point I like had a Reddit video that did well, and so I was like convinced for a while that I was going to be a great editor. Back when like Cloud9 was together. Actually, I think I edited a Travis Gafford house tour.
Wait, really?
Into a meme video. Yeah,
Into a meme
I'll
video?
find it after this interview.
Please
And I can
find
show it to you.
this.
And it did well on Reddit. And at that point, I was like, oh, I can make it as a video editor. But in this time of being a graphic designer, I tried a lot of things, and I didn't know anything about production. Right? Like I knew Premiere Pro, and I could navigate
Right.
that, and I could put a video together, and I like understood levels, basic design principles. Right? But I could never do production. And I think it's come up a few times, like if I would shift away from casting, what would I do? And I think it's definitely in that world of video editing.
Yeah.
Because I love seeing an idea come to life, and I also one of the things that's been nice about like the content that I've been able to make is I've been able to pitch for other people, and I really love seeing other people like execute on an idea that I've had and like nail it in their own way and do
Yeah.
things that like maybe I can't pull off. And Shocks is a good example of that, right? We wrote an advert where she was a therapist, and I was like, you can fucking nail this. Because like we've had these conversations, like I've been there on those nights at the bar where like some poor pro player is like crying because he's had a few too many, and he's like there, and you just like I can see it. I've been in that moment. I know you
Right.
can nail this part in a way that I never could. So like seeing that come to life was like was super cool, and I would love that feeling. Just it doesn't pay as well as being a shoutcaster, and I
Yeah.
love
No,
shoutcasting, so I'm not willing to give it up.
I I can relate to that. I mean, I love this job, but there are so many things in the esports and like streaming world where I just know I can provide so much value, and there's not very many people that get the space and can figure out how to like there's a lot of producers that have come from like general video games, people that have worked at like the GameSpots or whatever, and I worked with some of these folks at Yahoo Esports, and they're great, but it takes a long time for them to like really like marinate in the esports and streaming meme culture and figure out how to create something that really resonates with this community. And so I just like it has been a thought of mine where it's like, well, maybe if this goes away, right now Alienware is too generous with me, but we'll see if in the future something like that happens. But yeah, I mean, I just hearing from everybody about your involvement and seeing, I think you tweeted about all the videos that you've made, it does feel like if you ever wanted to step away from casting, like you could just go behind the scenes and make all these great videos and all this great content for whoever wanted to hire you.
I mean, I yeah, but like I also don't want to oversell my own contribution, right? Like I think I've had good ideas, and I think that like my knowledge in production helps me a lot with like communicating my ideas in a way that gets them made the way that like I envision them, as opposed to getting watered down or getting transitioned into something else. But also like I have just been so unbelievably lucky, and all of LEC has been so unbelievably lucky, like that we got this rebrand, that everything was nailed. Like I can't stress enough how much of like an absolute mess our team was for years leading up to this moment. And the only reason I get to do anything cool is because we have a team that is like so 100% behind me, and people who are so incredibly good at their job. And that was not a process of like, that was a tough process, right? Like
Yeah.
that's like the tough years. When people look back at EULCS and they talk about like the horrible years, like we know, trust me, they were bad behind the scenes too. Like, but like people were trying, and the fact that like we have this team that we do now is incredible. So while I would love to be like, hell yeah, I could go anywhere, I could make these great ideas, I could pop off, like I'm also just completely surrounded by incredibly talented people who nail it every time and help me make these ideas come to life and help me improve my ideas. So I'm also very paranoid about like leaving this team behind and realizing how privileged I have been this
Yeah.
entire time, and how maybe unaware I am that like this is not the reality for every esports production company.
But that's always how it is, right? Like no one can ever really succeed on their own, right? Like I think I have really fun ideas, but so much of it is also collaborating with Broden, and like there are those magical moments where it's like you and another person or you and a couple other people, and you have this idea, and then somebody else throws in this other part of it, and you're like, oh my god, that's amazing, and what if we did this, and you both start to jam on it, and all comes together. And I think, in my experience, if you can do that, it is true that like you need the right people around you, but also you get better at like identifying who those people are, and working on that stuff over time, and like building out that type of thing. I mean, that's why the industry, I think, so often you see people like everybody continues to work together, because you go and you get hired. Like let's say tomorrow I was hired by some broadcast company or something like that to create esports coverage, like I would immediately go and just hit up all my Yahoo esports folks and be like, okay, you're coming, you're coming, you're coming. You know, who can I get? Who can I poach? Who can I steal? And I feel like that's it's you can succeed as long as you know who you can work with. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're completely right. And I think the struggle of esports is there's like no one's refined the formula enough yet to consistently make good content, right? Like for over long periods of time. So people are never like your resume experience is so meaningless, right? Like it's so true of coaching staffs on teams, maybe not in the modern era, but back in the day where it was just like, oh, this guy's coached 8 teams. And it's like, well, what does that mean? What does
Yeah.
good League of Legends coaching look like? What does good League of Legends video production look like? What's success look like? So the only people you trust are the people that you've worked with because there's not really a good resume in esports right now for this kind of thing. Like, yeah, there's a good reel, but you don't know all of the people who work behind the scenes. And obviously, you should give people chances, but
Right.
like trust and actual firsthand experience with people, I think is just always the most valuable thing.
It's super true, and I think to your point also on just like it's so hard. Something that you said kind of made me think about people are kind of held to by the community and our peers like this expectation that everything always has to hit. And I actually
Mm.
think a lot about esports. You know, like, obviously right now I do think that there are some systemic issues with the LCS broadcast, but I also feel like when Twitch chat spams cringe and it goes up and it's like this bit or segment was awful. It's like these shows are so much closer to, and even like my interviews and all that type of stuff, late night talk shows where you are turning around content so quickly that like you don't have time. Like this is not a movie script where you iterate on it for a year and have other people come in and develop it. It's like, okay, cool. We did the broadcast on Saturday, Sunday, or Friday, Saturday, whatever. Now we have our 1 or 2 days off. Now we have to think of something and bring it to fruition over the next couple days. And I know that sometimes it's like, well, you can think about it in an expectation of like 2 or 3 weeks from now, but it's just the turnaround on this stuff is just so insane that like
Well,
not everything's going to hit the way you always want it to.
yeah, 100%. And like that turnaround point is so true because like generously I could say that we think about things 2 or 3 weeks at a time, but like our publishing team plans things in advance so we get to look like we're on top of things more than a week in advance. And there is
Right.
some foresight for like road shows and stuff in LEC, but otherwise everything's done week of, right?
Yeah.
Like we're trying to get better, and the only reason we even have breathing room to try and get better is because things are going so well that we can like back off and focusing in other areas, right? So we can like streamline the process more.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a mess, and you're always trying to repair a ship in motion. That's the nightmare because there's never like you get a stop period at the end of the season, but you never get to practice,
Yeah.
right? Like you're like, all right, guys, plan A completely failed for let's say 2017. 2018, here's our new plan based on our learnings. We have no idea if it's going to work or not. We have no chance to test it, but we're
Yeah.
going to start in 2018. Oh crap, didn't work. Well, let's try again for 2019. This is plan C.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens.
It's like it's iterate and release. It's never iterate, and then release. It's just like, well, that didn't work. So now we're gonna tweak this, put it out there, have people flame it or love it, and then like go and do the same thing again. It's just it's really wild. By the way, what do you do outside of your job? Like, what are you into?
Oh. So bouldering, I guess, is like one of my hobbies. I just like climbing. I think it's
Yeah.
just really fun. Even though I have a fear of heights, so it's a weird balancing act. I really love like video games, obviously, like everyone else. Like I play a ton of video games. I think music production is the thing that I'm like trying to get into more.
Yeah.
These rap battles have kind of inspired me to like learn more about music. And I've always just loved music, but never had the free time to pursue it, but like got lazy about it. But now I don't really have an excuse because I'm financially stable. I have free time when the schedule's not crazy. So like if there was ever a time to pick up a hobby, now is the time. So music is the pursuit right now. Music and trying to find more opportunities to write for content, I think, are the two things that I'm like really big on right now.
Man, you and Broden would just be best friends if you lived
Me and
in LA. Like,
me and Broden already had a great time, Travis, in Las Vegas. We were both flaming you for going to the Chainsmokers. I was like,
oh
Broden,
yeah,
you hate
yeah,
the Chainsmokers because every song sounds the same. He says, yes. I'm like, I don't hate them, but I agree. Every song is the same.
yeah, yeah. He does hate them. You no, but like he's trying to do more music stuff. I think you guys both have a very similar creative background. I mean, like you definitely, and you guys are about the same age too. It's actually kind of disturbing now as I'm realizing the
Look,
parallels. But
we like Travis's first dates. Like we can serialize the show. It's obviously a working title. We can
yes,
make it happen.
yes, yeah. You gotta you and him, I think would get along very very well. Either way, so you do. Wait, what video games do you play?
I mean, right. So I love all of the Dark Souls games.
Okay.
Immensely the entire like catalog. Anything Miyazaki makes, I'm about. I think those are the things that I play most consistently. That's not a multiplayer game.
Yeah.
But otherwise, like League of Legends, Valorant. Like I really want to be decent at Valorant. I grew up playing console shooters, so I'm honestly just so garbage at PC shooters.
Yeah.
Growing up playing Halo and Call of Duty does not prepare you. But yeah, Valorant is the goal right now. So that Bloodborne Dark Souls games, and like occasional indie Steam sale games.
Okay. So it's either stuff that's competitive or tough as nails, is what it seems like.
Yeah, but I'm also like not good at games, so it's a really weird combo because you'd hear that and you'd be like, "Wow, this guy's like must be a super big grinder." But I like
Yeah.
play 3 games of any competitive game and I'm instantly like, "Okay, I'm over it. I'm gonna go do something
Yeah.
else." Like I'm not a grinder. I'm not I'm not good at these games. I struggle my way through. I'm just I guess a masochist is what it comes down to.
Yeah, I am really bad at video games as well, and I just generally abandon them whenever I'm not going to be good at them. I think the things that maintain me on like the competitive side is always where my friends are. Like I haven't played League very much recently, actually for a bit, just because my friends all started playing like TFT and Valorant and all that stuff. So I started playing a lot more of that, and it just always ends up being kind of wherever my friends are at that I end up being. So
I think social gaming is by far the most fun. Like I
yeah,
think it's just I love doing stuff with people. Like I love talking to people, don't get me wrong, but I'd always rather do things with people because I think that those experiences are so cool. Yeah, and that's the number one thing that I think was going back to the transition. That was always what was hard for me is like giving up your gaming friends,
yeah,
right? Because I think that's the one thing that you build in like high school slash early college that you like can't necessarily replicate as an adult because you just progressively have less and less free time as you put more and more of your life into work. Is that like that 5 stack or whoever that you played whatever game you played with,
yeah.
and that's
And you
that's the
lost that when you went
best.
to Europe, I'm guessing.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. And I still see those people when I get a chance to go back to the U.S. Although we'll see now when that's going to be.
Right.
Stay safe, Travis.
Thank you. I can't
But
I can't go visit you. We've been in my opinion rightfully blacklisted by Europe. So
it's not your fault though, Travis. I want you to understand. There's just
yeah.
when the second a disease becomes a political opinion as to whether or not it exists or not, I think that people are in their right to start banning travel.
Yes, yeah, exactly. But regardless, actually, it's funny you say that because I'm pretty good friends with Spellsy, who used to work
Hmm.
with me at
And
CBSI,
worked
and then
and worked at Riot. Yeah, I
yes,
know Spelty very well.
and right around I think it was 2014, 2015, he ended up over in Berlin, and he talked a lot about like the time zones just killing like his social gaming hours with his friends because it becomes impossible at that point in time.
It's true, but also I respect Spelsley because he was one of the few people I know that would play on 130 ping
Yes.
to play with his friends in NA, which I thought was so cool. And at the time, I didn't get it because I was just like, "Oh, how could you possibly do that?" But now I really do. It's like, who cares?
Yeah.
It's a normal game. Just have fun with your friends.
Well, I want to jarringly lead this conversation away from you and more to LEC because
Sure.
I'm trying to understand. Okay, so I'm just gonna be. I used to be a little self-conscious about admitting this because I felt like the community would flame me or whatever. But I don't watch LEC. I don't know what's going on over there.
Shit, that's
And
tough, dude.
I know, but I did tune in for G2 Fnatic because I'm like, okay, it's G2 Fnatic.
I see.
Like this is something to watch, right? And then I was really confused because I looked at the score lines for both of those teams, and I was like, this is not what I'm used to seeing. Whatever these two teams play, it's like okay, G2 undefeated, Fnatic looks like they have a loss. I'm guessing that was probably from G2 previously. Like what is going on?
I mean, to be honest, like shit's on fire.
In a good way,
Uh,
like oh man, it's sick that
yeah,
all our
like
teams are competitive, or is it like
it depends on what you define as a good way. Domestically, yes.
okay,
Internationally, arguably no. Yeah, basically like so. Shout out to Mad Lions who are currently top of the table. They look really good. They look like they've like leveled up and could absolutely contest a G2 and a Fnatic, even though they did lose to G2. But basically, just like G2 had some completely horrible games, and in G2 fashion, they're just like tweeting about, oh, XD, we'll get them next week,
Yeah.
kind of thing, you know. And so it's kind of the problem with G2 as a team that's been so successful as a broadcast is that it's like any criticism that you try to lay on them, it feels like next week they can just show up and then they just make you look like an idiot,
Yeah, then
right?
people are
Because
like, this is what I've been saying about these casters. They take these single best
yeah,
of
they take this
ones.
blah 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 blah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
and like that's the thing. And but on the other end, if you don't criticize them, they're like, what? How can you not criticize G2? It's like,
Yeah.
guys, they are inting, but also remember that historically they've just outside of 1 year where Fnatic won, they've always won.
Yes.
And else they weren't here, in which case Fnatic was winning anyway. So when
Yeah.
either of these teams are underperforming, I think it's like always a nightmare to navigate the criticism. But I will say that G2 seemingly try hard in the Fnatic game. Even Fnatic are struggling. They look solid. They're a bit all over the place, but I don't think people should like if you're wondering which teams the LEC is going to send to Worlds, it's still probably the people you expect. It's still the G2s and Fnatics. This is like not by any means the end of the world. That said, Fnatic do look super lost. Their mid laner's struggling. They're playing like weird Soraka bot lane. Graves is our only real carry threat kind of compositions. And so there are Fnatic fans are up in arms right now. They are not happy. They were not happy when Fnatic was losing to anyone, and they are especially not happy when they were losing to G2. So that's a hotbed. If you're looking for like some sick clickbait, just like I'll just rip on Fnatic fans
Yeah,
for 10
thank you.
seconds.
That'd be great.
We'll
People
we'll
will
get you another
tune in. There'll be 35 minutes of you talking about growing up and the wondrous world of esports, and then they'll just be like, as soon as they're gonna click away, it'll just pop up, and you'll be like, yeah, Fnatic is shit.
Fnatic is completely lost and falling to pieces. That's yeah, I think Fnatic's struggling. I can't say why, right? I think the thing is Fnatic is a team that's always been kind of rife with drama, and some of that is because there is drama on the team, and some of that is because it's like projected on because people want like if there's such a team worth talking about.
Yeah,
they have so many
TSM is the same
personalities.
for us. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's hard for me because I've talked to this team a lot over the years, so I know some of the past issues, right? Like that have come up. And so like I have my concerns and I have my worries, but I think that for now it's 1 or 2 bad weeks. I'm worried that they're going to end up doing what they've done a lot in the past and they've been vocal about doing in the past, which is like they find these band-aid solutions because they can't really like they don't have the time to get to the root of whatever problem they're experiencing behind the scenes. And instead they just like find something that works and fits, whether it's like a cheesy bot lane like Garen Yumi, or a different play style, you know, and they're good at it. It's why they've done the 0-3 to make it out of groups things 2 or 3 times now. But at the same time, it's like it's never something you're excited to hear about because every time Fnatic builds a new roster, we're like, maybe this is the time.
Yeah.
Maybe this is the time they all click on a personality level and they just get to pop off, you know, and they just get to have their year. And it always feels like there's something that either comes out later or comes out during the year that gets in the way of that. So,
And then it
kind of a
immediately gets
bummer.
denied by everyone involved.
I mean, not. We are very fortunate. The Whippos of the world, the Broxes of the world, even Reckless recent years has been very open about talking about the struggles behind the scenes.
I thought that was the whole meme at the end of last year where they said like the rumors that we didn't get along or whatever were completely off base or whatever.
To be fair, they were like the rumors were like people were physically assaulting each other. So the rumors were intense. So
I hadn't heard that. I had just heard that
I think there was Brox punched Reckless. I can't remember. There's so many rumors that circulate about that. It's like, oh, Brox and Reckless, they like punched each other after a scrim or something. It was, hushed whispers.
Right. I hadn't heard that, but that's great. Thank you for that headline. As you said you were going to give me some Fnatic stuff, and so
wait, but that was like a public thing. I never heard or confirmed that. That's a bus
I'm just going to say Drakos responds to rumors that Broxa punched Reckless while on Fnatic,
or the other way around. I don't actually remember, but that was like something that was circulating
of alleged fist fight between Broxa and Reckless.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
So what's the story with Mad Lions? Because this is like new faces, right?
Yeah, so Mad Lions is really, really interesting. So we did Euphoria filming this morning, comes out tomorrow. Shameless self-promotion, 12 p.m. CEST.
Yeah.
I don't know, 3 a.m. in LA time. If you're still
Can't
awake,
wait.
if you're in peak gamer hours.
Yes.
Yeah, but so we talked to Mac, who's their head coach, and I think Mad Lions is kind of this culmination of years of effort behind the scenes that a lot of people aren't going to see of building up a coaching and support staff that all kind of share a strategic vision and have like really clear goals as to what they want and what they want from their team. And then them finally, this is the Splice, formerly Splice, and then them finally being able to build a roster and get a roster that aligns with those goals. it was really interesting. And I'm just gonna like kind of, I guess, steal my own content from the series. But
Sure.
Matt came out and he talked a lot about his goals for the team, and it was like super inspirational. He talked about how, like their goal as an organization is not like yes, they want to win. Yes, they want to build the best team possible, but his personal goal as a coach is um, not to just produce winners, but he wants to make his players feel like they have improved as players, that they have improved as people, that they have grown as human beings at the end of it. And he's gotten all of them bought into this system. And now it's like paying off. And we get to see a team that last season looked pretty good, kind of surprised us, like did some good stuff that rookies kind of do in Europe sometimes where they're more confident, they play aggressive. Yeah, they had a lot of 1-1 weeks, but they beat G2. Yay.
Yeah.
Like that was the cool story. But now they're very good. They're pushing their mechanical limits. They're trying new things constantly. And for the first time in a long time, it feels like we actually have someone who is going to contest G2 and Fnatic in a way that is more than a single best of five. And that's partially player skill. Their support Kaiser is the next Hillisang or Mickey X if you're an EU fan, like the big playmaker, the big obviously very smart about the game, but also the guy who shows up in the clutch and makes that crazy turnaround play that wins the game. Their mid laner Humanoid, who went under the radar for a long time on Splice, is kind of like this inconsistent guy. I don't know if it's the strategic vision that he's suddenly behind from this team, or if it's that he's motivated by all these young, hungry players that are surrounding him, but he's popping off. He's playing Orianna in a way that's just like, oh, so it's actually such a pleasure to watch. Because like you've watched League for years.
Yeah.
Orianna isn't a champion you'd call exciting. Like there's
No, I mean
exciting
you get the
Orianna
big ults
moments.
sometimes where it's like, oh,
Yeah.
but like the ball moving back and forth is not particularly exciting.
I agree, but he makes it exciting, which is so cool, right? Because we've seen
Yeah.
so many years of just boring ass Orianna play where it's just like, oh, they're gonna ult in the team fight, and that's gonna be their entire contribution. But like,
Yes.
you get to remember that Orianna has a passive that makes her auto attacks do more damage because this guy is like in everyone's face trying to dance around skill shots,
Right.
And it's yeah, they're honestly just a really fun team to watch, and it feels like this concept just keeps coming up, but it just feels like a situation where just everything's kind of come together for this team, and it's nice because the Splice organization, I think, for the longest time was plagued with like negative perception, and some of it justified. They were not a very exciting team.
Right.
And then for Mad Lions to come in and get this fresh start and to have this much success right off the bat is super cool. Like, I think right now they're the best performing team in the league, and I would not be surprised if it's them playing in the finals versus the G2s and Fanatics and not G2 versus Fnatic against each
Right.
other.
Do you think I remember back in the day, TSM was just winning everything, and I tend to not really like root for or against anything, but there were many times where it was such a relief when CLG beat G2 at Madison Square, or sorry, CLG beat TSM at Madison Square Garden. A lot of letters going on there, abbreviations, MSG. Anyway, and in part because it was like finally like the end of this like, and then these teams go to the finals and then TSM beats CLG or TSM wins again or whatever. It's interesting because in Europe where like Brippo I did an interview with him at All Stars where he said something like, I can understand why Broxa went to Team Liquid because if you're in Europe and you're not on Fnatic or G2, you shouldn't expect to lift a trophy. And it's fascinating because in one sense I am really jealous of what you guys have over there with G2. You've got like this team with like amazing personalities. They crush and they do well and they're internationally competitive and all that stuff. And in another sense, it's like I wonder if that just becomes tiresome at a certain point in time, like just to have this team winning so much and like at a certain point in time, it's like, what do we talk about anymore?
I mean, honestly, yeah, we've been there as a broadcast team. Like, we've had the weeks where G2 are just going completely undefeated, and the question is like, all right, are they going to take it seriously and try to go for the 18-0, or are they going to, experiment and run it down? And it's when a team wins so consistently, so effortlessly, and when they have this kind of cocky, like, we don't, excuse me, have to care personality.
Yeah.
Because the only thing from their perspective that matters is, hey, we want to win the split, we want to go to Worlds, right? And like we think regular season's important, but like not that important for them. It does make it really hard. And the thing that's like, that's part of the reason why Mad Lions is so exciting is that we finally have a team to push. It feels like G2 and Fnatic to play at their full potential. But I think when Bwipo said that, he was completely right. Like those were the two teams that were going to win every single time, and you had. I mean, you could, if you were a fan of a team, maybe you would believe otherwise. But like, if you were an analyst behind the scenes, you didn't really have a reason to believe that because they were just teams just couldn't break through to the level of League of Legends that Fnatic and G2 are playing at. And now I feel like Europe's in this time and space or time and place where is good and it's bad. And I said this at the start of kind of when we started talking about this. It's good because domestically, like G2 have hit a ceiling they have not been able to break. That's my opinion. And I think Fnatic are in a similar boat. And Mad Lions are catching up to that ceiling. And we're going to be in this position now where I don't think Europe's going to we're not going to surpass ourselves at Worlds this year. I think
Yeah.
we'll do great. Maybe with a favorable bracket draw, like we could win Worlds, right? And that's obviously something to be really excited about. But now we're in the position that we were in right before Caps joined the league, where it's like we're waiting for someone to break through that ceiling again, to show us again like what the next top team will look like. And that's really exciting. But if that hadn't happened, if we just had another split or another year of just G2 dominating, especially after Fnatic got 3-0'd in our most recent final,
Yeah.
it wouldn't be exciting anymore, you know? And I think the one horse race is the worst. The two horse race is fine as long as both teams are compelling to watch. But like the fact that we have three now is just like, oh my God, I just can't believe it. Like things just keep going right for the LEC. And I'm
Yes.
like, people keep giving us credit. And I'm like, okay, we deserve some, but also, God damn, are we lucky? Hell
I
yeah, our
mean,
players have personalities.
on the other hand, there's a prevailing sentiment among some that work on or around the LCS that when TSM is doing good, that is the best possible thing for the LCS. That like almost if you were to take a situation where you all you care about is like viewership and engagement and
Mm-hmm.
interview numbers and blah blah blah, you need to be a TSM fan because you want them to succeed. And I wonder if there's any sense for you of like G2 winning and winning so consistently has been, even if it has been a one horse race, like that just is really good for Europe because people care about this team, people tune in, and like I don't know, it's just
Yeah,
interesting.
what I ultimately think it is like I agree. Like, and if people in North America like we want TSM to win because there's more viewership, like I get that because G2
Yeah,
and Fnatic are our two most popular teams, and part of that's because they win, and that's fine. And the fact that like we were so fortunate last summer to have two back-to-back G2 versus Fnatic best of fives that went all the way, because historically in League of Legends finals are
yeah,
not always great, especially World Finals, right? It's like
yeah.
almost always a 3-0
For a while there was
semifinals.
just a curse, a World Finals curse, where they were just always really bad.
Yeah, I think they've yeah.
There's been some good ones, but yeah,
We'll see. Maybe we change. I mean, I can't. I have no authority in this area, but I would love to see a world's format change where we get a more refined semifinal process, so we actually get the two best teams at the end, and we don't
yeah,
have the world final played in a semifinal unintentionally because of
sure,
the way the bracket's drawn. But yeah, like we're very fortunate to have that, and even now, I'm sure, I don't know the viewership statistics, but I'm sure our most popular teams are still G2 and Fnatic, and I'm sure for the business side of things, right? Like if the raw viewership numbers, that's always good. The more G2 Fnatics that you can put in front of people, the better. Um, but the fact that that is contested is really exciting. That said, I'm sure that if my boss got to pick or my boss's bosses got to pick, they would go, like we love Mad Lions, but they're gonna have like if we could write the script, they'll have
yeah,
a
yeah.
very close game in the semifinal, and then it'll be G2 Fnatic for the full best of five at the
Right,
end of the
yes,
day, right? And that's just the business reality I think of a sports league, right? Is that like you all like if you can pick, of course you want from a purely business standpoint, from like taking a
yes,
competition out of it completely, you always just want the two most popular teams to play. And we're fortunate that our two most popular teams have played, that they've played into the rivalry and gotten passionate about it, and that they also both happen to be very successful internationally.
yeah. All right, so we've talked about you and we've talked about Lacey, which brings me to my final point. Would you ever come to the LCS? Would you move back to your homeland and be in LA? Is this something you've considered? I don't know.
Yeah, so for a while when I first started my career, it was kind of just like an inevitability of like when would I return to NA, not like if. Now I'm not so certain. Like I think that North America and working in North America at Riot's like a really cool opportunity because you're so close to the games as well. And I think that's always just like the potential to branch out in your career and develop new skills is just like much easier there. Whereas as much as I love esports, like I'm very limited to just esports and the
Right.
office that I'm in. Um, but that said, we talked earlier, like I love my team and it would take a lot to get me away from this team. And like the thing is like I don't want like power, and like money's obviously great, and obviously everyone's going to have a number at a certain point when it comes to these things, but like I don't need money. I'm not hurting for money. The thing that I love is that like I get to cast on a weekly basis, which is fun, engaging, continue to get better at that as I go, and I get to pitch and make content that I love. So like I'm very happy where I'm at. If my boss is watching this, I'm miserable. I'm going to leave any moment.
Yes.
um I've gotten tons of offers on the
and
table
and,
for sure.
and money is a
Double
high
my
priority for
salary,
you.
and money's a very high
Yes.
priority.
Yes.
Dirk, if you're
Debt is
watching
something
this.
you're concerned about. You need to make sure you are as insulated against it as possible.
Yeah, yeah. So if anyone asks, that would be my answer. But no, I'm really content. And the thing is that I love NA esports scene. Like that's what I grew up on. I was an OG CLG fan, furthering the narrative that I'm a total masochist. But yeah, I think it would be a hard transition for me to come back. And I think that if I did, I think it would be like if I ever made the transition to purely video production or creative direction in any kind of way, marketing, advertising, anything like that within the Riot sphere, then I would be super excited to work on a new project because I think that would be very exciting for me. But
Yeah.
for right now, I'm enjoying
You
making.
don't miss America? I know now's a weird time to ask that question, but separating
I
current
I do.
events.
I miss my friends. I miss the city I grew up in. I love coming to LA, and I love that team. I love that casting team so much. They
They're
are
okay.
they're okay. I love Mark C. I love Zale. Shout out to both of them. They're always talking to me. It's always really good to hear from those guys. But I love that entire team. Pastry team basically taught me how to cast. Our pastry team, pastry time. So like I have nothing but love and respect. Dash was at my first event. He like babied me through the
You're
entire
saying too
thing.
many
And
names. Now you have to say them all, otherwise you're screwed.
no, it's fine. I love them all. I love them all
Okay.
equally. Kobe once picked me up at my first party at the CLG gaming house and spun me around in a circle and put me down.
Yeah, that's
He
the
had never
Kobe.
talked. He had never talked to me
Yes,
before. That was my first
that's the
Kobe
Kobe thing.
experience.
Yes, it's universally
No,
known behind the scenes that he just picks people up and then spins them.
there you go.
Yeah,
So yeah, I love that team. I would love to work on projects. I think adjacent to that team, but given my love for like the LEC team, I think that it would. I don't think I could ever go to another esports product at this point, or esports broadcast product, and be content with anything that wasn't this. I'm so comfortable, and maybe that's bad, and that's gonna
yeah.
bite me in the butt in like 2 years if our content starts to get crappy. But like for right now, I'm loving it, and it's hard for me to imagine going anywhere else.
Okay. Next question. Carlos comes to you and he says, "Hey, I need a SVP of content and marketing, and I will double what you're making, whatever those guys and paying you over at the LEC, and you'll have full creative control. And because then you're still in Berlin, you're still around your team." He's
Mm.
like, "And you can hire a couple people if you want. Here's your
Oh
budget. You
man.
could try to poach them." And I don't know if there's anti tampering. G2 doesn't care about
I
tampering, so you could
I
you could pick
well,
up people from.
yes, I think G2 would not care a lot, and I
Yeah.
think I would get many angry emails from
Yes.
various team owners for trying to poach Riot staff. I think that's probably a no-no. I
Yeah.
don't know, but I assume it's a no-no. Yeah, I mean, I would heavily consider that because I love the G2 boys, and I have so many G2 specific content pitches from knowing them well because they
Yeah.
are all incredibly good pro players and very mediocre adults. And I think the content around that is juicy and just not well enough explored in esports. So I would consider that. I would do that. I'm not locked in to Riot Games forever, right? It's really good right now and I really love it right now, but there will be a point where I think I need to like let go of this thing that I've been a part of that has been built up and like try new things out. And G2 is certainly tempting. Honestly, working for any team is always really tempting because I think that if they're willing to put the right resources into it, I think esports content is not as hard as people make it out to be. It's just a matter of finding people who are like-minded and passionate, and that's
Yeah.
what's difficult. It's not that you need to have a gigantic.
The biggest challenge with esports content is getting access to the players, and so maybe on the Riot side you've been able to do that, but that is the pain. I feel like you would have more than anything trying to work for a team.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Like I think I would definitely need to come into a team where they believe in it. Cause like even I love the G2 boys. They're like, all right, it's a content day,
Yeah.
And like some days they're like, hell yeah, let's do content. Some days they're like, oh God, it's a content day,
Yeah. Whereas I mean, it's been frustrating for me because, and I won't name any names, but I do think there are a lot of players at the top of LCS who are popular and are just like, they just drag their feet so much in making any content. And I'm not talking about with myself. I mean, like, I think LCS broadcast has had a hard time getting access to some people. And so I think that's the stuff that kind of drives me crazy.
I mean, I completely agree. And I would love to see an attitude shift so that people appreciate more of like what their appearance and presence does for a scene. Cause I think that like when you're the Afro moves and the double lifts of the world. Like you've seen it all, you've been there, you've done it all. Like you don't really care about the extra press, even if it's like good for the league for you
Yeah.
to do just step up and do an interview. And obviously, I don't know if any of these guys
No,
have
you've
stand-up
named
just
them.
example.
So now people will think those are the two people. So
Yes, they don't want to give
Draco's
press.
response to a double
Afro
lift
move
and
not
Afro
doing
moves
interviews.
resentment around doing content in the LCS.
Um, yeah, and yeah, but I would love to see just people appreciate more like what it can do and like how it can build a fan base. But like once you've gotten there, there's no real incentive for you to do it, right? When you're famous, when you're making
Yeah.
all the money you want to make, like why? What's your incentive? And so teams just put it in their friggin' contracts, like please, with like clear, harsh stipulations. And maybe, as a general note, stop letting your players have so much authority. I feel like it's a problem for a lot of orgs across the esports scene that players let players be players. They don't also need to be in charge of everything else.
Yeah. Well, is there anything you want to say? Because the dive is almost being filmed on the other side of this wall, which means that
Oh,
Kobe and I
nice.
will need to get lunch. So I'm hungry. I'm gonna go to Apple Panda. I'm gonna eat an amazing meal that you can't get in Germany because you're in
Okay,
Germany.
that's fair. I do miss the LA food
Yes.
all the time. Even just Sawtell. Even just Sawtell. People meme
Yes.
it because I know that's everywhere everyone goes all the time, but I don't
Yes.
have Sawtell, so it's special to me still.
Yes.
What do I want to say? I two things. One, thank you, Travis. Two, my favorite Travis moment was your Prawley interview where you asked a guy on his sign if it was CLG, and he said no, it's a shark because there was a picture of a shark on it. That's my favorite Travis moment. I remember that
Okay.
fondly.
Thank
I
you.
almost made
I
a
don't
game video.
recall that at all, but
It's fun.
I was interviewing Prolly, and during the interview, I asked a fan about a sign.
Yeah, they had a CLG sign because they were walking in front of your camera. And the CLG
Oh.
sign had CLG written on it, some player signatures, and a shark. And you pointed at the sign. You said, "Is that for CLG?" And you pointed at the shark, and the guy said, "No, it's a shark." And probably immediately roasted you. And that was where I really fell in love with Probably as a personality. So that was
Yes.
my first.
I
Also,
would love to see him be more of the zany person he was in my interviews on the LCS broadcast, but maybe it's just too difficult for him to do
he's
that with
such a
that
good
tone.
antagonist. He was
Yeah,
such a at the time I was like, God, this guy is such a piece
yeah.
of shit. This poor Travis Gafford, he's just getting bullied endlessly. But it was good content.
It was good
Um,
content. There's nobody like that anymore in the LCS. I miss it.
yeah, and other than that, shout out to like the whole team, but especially to Shocks and Vedius, like because Shocks really pushed me to come forward and take more credit for like the work that I'm doing behind the scenes because I won't say I'm like super humble. It's definitely not the case, but I don't like put myself out there because I feel like
Yeah,
it's a team effort. So I don't want to like take credit away from other people, right? Like I always want to like give that caveat. And the other person is Vedius because like I think half the shit that has happened that has given us like such a strong brand identity. Like never came from design studio, never came from a senior leadership discussion or a strategy meeting. It came from Vedius being fucking weird and being unashamedly weird and wanting to do weird stuff, and that clicked and people liked that, and that's when people got invested. It was not a conscious decision from some strategy mastermind. It was
yeah.
just Vedius being himself, and like that is such a cool trait in esports where everyone is trying to manufacture personality. So
Yes.
shout out to Vedius, shout out to Shocks.
No, that's a really good point because people try to come up with ideas on like here's the process by which we'll have this, or here's how this will go, or like what are the main themes or moments that we're trying to touch on. And ultimately, so much of the value in content is always going to be the person who has just like the stupid idea, they want to do it, and like they know people will like it. You just force it through, you know?
Yeah. And oh yeah, Ovly's so like that, and I think that's why Ovly's always so successful with content, right? Is she's
Yes.
just like not afraid to just do it and execute herself.
No, I mean the Ovally is a really great example of. I feel like so when she came into Yahoo, it was like, okay, I'm going to teach you what I know, and I think there are a lot of ideas that she has had since where I would have been like, that's a stupid idea. Don't do that. Like she has made me re-examine. Like she taught me a lot about not taking yourself too seriously because I used to have a lot of producers that would try to push me to do really zany weird shit, and I'd be like, no, I don't want to do that because I don't want it to get memed on and like cringe and all that stuff. And just seeing Ovly not take herself too seriously, that's what allowed me to like do the Gafford Esports Awards, which is like a really stupid show that I do with Broden. And like
I love
Broden,
the Gafford Esports Award. Don't sell
yes,
yourself short.
I mean
Brilliant piece of production.
yes, I'm really happy with it, but it is so stupid. So either way, hey, thank you so much for sitting down
Yeah, no
and
problem.
talking to me. I'm hoping to do more of this stuff. I'm realizing this is I'm going to say this while I'm recording, even though I probably should have saved it for after. People might say, "Man, Travis's his interviews aren't what I want them to be." And then they say that after I've interviewed a very awkward pro player who hasn't done too many interviews, and I'm limited to having about 10 minutes of time, maybe less, to have the conversation with them. And I'm realizing I can just cheat the system by interviewing a bunch of people in the space who talk for a living, and then everyone will go, Travis is a god at interviewing. It's just that's my plan. So
Yeah, I also just like yeah, even with media training, so many pro players suck at interviews for literal years. Literal years. There was like a 3-year period where Reckless was just Mr. Professional and every Reckless interview sucked, and then he just started not caring, and they were
yes,
all gold from that moment on. Like
yeah,
the second that they know enough that they understand where the lines are, but they don't have to consciously think about them, they're perfect. They're the
yeah,
best interview subjects ever. Until then, it's so bad. It's
yeah,
so awkward. It's the same forced answers. Hey, we're working on it, or hey, it's going really well right now, but don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves.
yeah,
We've
yeah,
all been there.
yeah. Anyway, thanks so much for the interview. For everyone else, you can check out the rest of my coverage of all things esports right here on my YouTube channel.